off than you are? Or would you rather be a mule? A mule is an animal with long funny ears. He kicks up at anything he hears. His back is brawny and his brain is weak. He's just plain stupid with a stubborn streak. And by the way, if you hate to go to school, you may grow up to be a mule. Or would you like to swing on a star, carry moonbeams home in a jar, and be better off than you are? Or would you rather be a pig? A pig is an animal with dirt on his face. His shoes are a terrible disgrace. He's got no manners when he eats his food. He's fat and lazy and extremely rude. But if you don't care a feather or a fig, you may grow up to be a pig. Or would you like to swing on a star, carry moonbeams home in a jar, and be better off than you are? Or would you rather be a fish?
Well, would you?
A fish won't do anything to swim in a brook. He can't write his name or read a book. To fool the people is his only thought. And though he's slippery, he still gets caught. But then if that sort of life's what you wish, you may grow up to be a fish. And all the monkeys on in that zoo, every day you meet quite a few. So you see, it's all up to you. You could be better than you are. You could be swinging on a star.
Good afternoon. I'm John Kotsis, the Chief Executive of QPAC, and on behalf of our Chair, Professor Peter Coldrake, AO, and the Board, welcome. The South Bank area, where QPAC stands, has long been established as a meeting place and trading point for the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. I'm pleased to acknowledge and honour them as the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to their elders. It's important that we, as a major arts body, continue the traditions of those who've danced, made music and told stories here long before these buildings were built. On behalf of the Board, the Executive and the entire QPAC community, I offer deepest condolences to you, Carmel, to Monica and Sarah, Daniel, Jonathan and David. This afternoon, though, is a celebration of John's life, his contribution and his legacy. So this afternoon, I'm going to talk about John as architect, John as teacher, and John as artist. It's a privilege to be speaking from the concert hall stage which was so familiar to John for over 35 years. Over the years here at QPAC, we've grappled with what makes QPAC great. What does legacy mean, and what is significant? For me, it's the artists and the talents that they give QPAC. For me, it's the artists and their talents that give QPAC its heritage value. John was a trained architect. An architect is an artist who imagines the possible. Architecture is not just about concrete and glass. It's about taking raw materials and using them as building blocks to create something new, something wonderful, something inspirational. John took his formal training into every aspect of his life. John had a vision, and he imagined what could be and committed his life's work to building an institution that has resonated with multiple generations. For the past 50 years, the QYO and the AYO have been the foundation stone on which so much contemporary orchestral practice has been built and continues to be built. Scholars believe that good teaching cannot be reduced to technique. Good teaching comes from the identity and the integrity of the teacher. As a teacher, John had a great gift. He was able to identify people with a passion for music and encourage them to let their passion flourish through disciplined application and joy. He was an inspiration to many people who would go on to build careers in music at home, nationally and internationally. But John also understood, for music to thrive in our communities, talented musicianship needs an engaged and educated audience. His legacy can be seen today, not just on our stages, but in the stalls and balconies of our concert halls, and also in the schools and universities where young people strive for careers in music. In the 60s, John began the QYO. Where would we be now without that institution? All of us here today know that art comes firstly from a local context. Every artist brings their own unique sensibility to their work. Artists like John go beyond the local context, and their impact becomes a unique imprint that is recognised universally. John was an accomplished player, but it was in his conducting where his artistry really came to the fore. He was able to bring out the best in both individuals and groups, and he knew instinctively how to listen, lead, mould, and shape an ensemble. Yet most importantly, he knew that a great conductor guides and doesn't command. So how do you measure greatness and significance? In John's case, it's easy. Look around you. Listen to the performances today. Think of the QYO alumni and the contributions they've made and continue to make to music making all over the world. We all carry his legacy with us. John was an architect, a teacher, and an artist. John was truly one of Australia's great cultural leaders. He was a real statesman. He was a giant. And most of all, he was truly significant.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this celebration of the life and legacy of John Curro. We would like to begin by also acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, Mianjin, Brisbane, on which this memorial celebration takes place today. We recognise the country north and south of the Brisbane River as the home of both the Turrbal and Jagera nations. We pay our deepest respects to all elders past, present and emerging. My name is Monica Curro, and I'm here with my sister Sarah to say, thanks, to say a few words and a few thousand thank yous. But I'll speak really fast, don't worry. First of all, huge thanks to the wonderful QYO Big Band for their magnificent performance of Dad's favourite song, Swinging on a Star, from 1944, the same year our marvellous mum, Carmel, was brought into the world. The inspirational and aspirational words of this song completely encapsulate Dad's belief that every person could and should strive to be the best possible version of themselves. And his faith inspired many people's aspirations. Heartfelt thanks to everyone for the deluge of love and words and memories and stories about our father in letters, phone calls, texts, and via multiple social media platforms. It has been overwhelmingly amazing. Enormous thanks to Jeff Rosbrook and his team at QYO for organising this epic event. And we thank the members of the QYO board and the many other volunteers for their generous commitment to this great institution. Endless thanks to Peter Luff, who has always shown unwavering support of QYO and of Dad, very often in the most difficult times of Dad's life. We would like also to express our deep gratitude to John Kotzis at QPAC for offering this beautiful space, and also to the Lord Mayor, Adrian Schrinner, and the Brisbane City Council for offering the City Hall on the same day. Nothing personal, this just holds more people. I think the parking's slightly, anyway. We thank all our concert sponsors, QPAC, JTV Video and Jason Whiting, Five Stream, Paul Evans and the team, QPrint, Road Pro, HWL, Ebsworth. We thank all the musicians who have donated their time and expertise to be involved today. Maestro Peter Luff, the QYO Big Band, singers Adelina Martinez and Matt Copley, the members of the current Queensland Youth Symphony Orchestra, slightly enhanced by the most recent Alumni, and the members of the QIS Alumni Orchestra. Today, the Queensland Youth Orchestra is launching the John Curro Memorial Fund to honour our Dad's legacy by continuing to assist young musicians, including those from disadvantaged circumstances. There is information about the fund on the back of your programs, and any level of support, however large or small, will be greatly appreciated. We are also pleased to announce that the National Youth Concerto Competition, or the NYCC, will be renamed the John Curro National Youth Concerto Competition from 2020 onwards. The NYCC has been funded every year since its creation in 1976 by generous individuals and corporate sponsors. Former QYO President Colin Myers has done an amazing job in gathering multiple donors who wish to remain anonymous except for their collective title, the Friends of NYCC. And we have just heard this week that their combined contributions will cover what is needed for the 2020 NYCC to go ahead. Would you please join us in thanking them? I have a tiny addendum to my speech. It's a fun fact. We have with us in the viola section, you'll see in the Respighi, Dr. John Hemming. You'll see he's got a great mop of curly hair, who was in the original orchestra in 1966. And not only that, as an obstetrician, he has delivered many QYO babies. Yeah. And just before I hand over to my baby sister Sarah, I'd like to thank our incredible mum, Carmel, for her unconditional love, tireless support and relentless optimism, without which Dad's work and all of us and all of this would not have been remotely possible. Thank you.
do we do now that he's gone? Are we miserable? Are we empty? Do we feel abandoned? I believe we have to ask much deeper questions about his impact on this earth to start to feel a little bit better. Did he prop us up artificially with compliments and fake praise? Or did he push us to our very limits, leaving no string chord out of tune, no woodwind entry untogether? Did he ever give up on anyone? Breathe together! Was he political or faction-forming, a chameleon for all occasions? Or was he honest and emotional to a fault, and because of it, completely authentic with every interaction? Did he let lack of money stop what needed to be done? Or did he dream big, even if it meant digging into his own pocket over and over and over again? And consequently, was he generous in ways that would make your accountant cry? Did he teach us to respect the rules, but also to fight them tooth and nail where there was any injustice or corruption? Did he need us to copy him like some cult leader? Or did he expect us to find our truest, most authentic and best selves, no matter what our profession? Soprano Tarita Botsman answers this in a recent message to me. Tarita writes, I will never forget him conducting me singing Send in the Clowns in the Queensland Conservatorium production of Sondheim's A Little Night Music. He said to me, just sing it, Tarita, sing it your way, not the way you've heard it on a recording. He was allowing me to be, to sing, to stay in each moment, to hold every silence as long as it needed to be. And every night we got a standing ovation, thanks to him. Glorious memories of superb musician and leader. Queensland will never be quite the same without him. So, did he leave us full of ideas and memories and stories and laughter at the sheer Jupiter of the man? Once we've answered all these questions, we start to manifest those best qualities in our own lives, and yes, he will live on. It's the end of his era, but it's our era now. We pass these ideas and philosophies to those around us in John Curro style, meaning whether they like it or not. To our children, to our students, to our colleagues, and even to our perceived enemies, because there was no one who, at the end of the day, when all was said and done, no one who was more forgiving than him. So he has left us with the ability to be better people if we choose. What he didn't much help us with at all was how to be restrained or half-hearted or compromising, but showed us the way to push life hard, to bend the universe, shape the very fabric of society, and to turn it into a place where everyone is welcome and absolutely everyone can reach a potential they wouldn't have even recognised in themselves were it not for him. And now I just want to end with a letter from Sergio De Pieri, organist and founder of many festivals across Victoria. A person who was about to start his life in Australia picking fruit, and because of a chance meeting and one small moment of inspiration from our father, ended up as one of the most loved and appreciated contributors to Victorian Musical Society. This letter was written by Sergio to my father after he passed away. The translation from Italian is by Judy Houston. Dear John, you will always be in my heart as the best, most beautiful and generous person I have met in my whole life. You have created around you a beautiful garden filled with tanti piccoli fiori musicali. That means many small musical flowers, by the way, that you have nurtured and developed with great patience and skill. Now these young instrumentalists are spreading throughout the world, creating and carrying the most beautiful musical sounds, bringing new life and light to a world full of corruption and dissonance. Thank you, Sergio, and thanks so much to all of you here. And most of all, oh, his picture's gone. Most of all, thanks, Dad. We are all here because of you. Thank you.
Carmel, Monica, Sarah, Dan, Dave, Johnny, ladies and gentlemen, I could speak for a very long time about John off the cuff. He's been such an amazing part of my life, and that would take rather a long time. So I have written a small speech which I will read for the sake of brevity. Thank you. On the 25th of September past, I sent John a photo taken backstage just after Ray Chen had performed a Mendelssohn violin concerto with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. My accompanying caption for the photo read as follows: 5 QYOers who wouldn't be where without, 5 QYOers who wouldn't have been where we are now without you. From left, JC, Bobby McIndoe, Roger Young, Dale Balthrop and Ray Chen. 50 years of QYO represented. John's reply: Dear Jeff, lovely photo, thanks. Please give them and you a hug from me. He then proceeded on to more pressing matters. Haven't hit a golf ball since last November. Withdrawal symptoms now severe. Keep well, John. He still outdrove me, even at the end of last year, which is amazing. I first met John when he led the orchestra for the Mikado at the Wynnum School of Arts in the first season of the Savoyards Light Opera Company in 1964. I was 12, my brother Keith was 14. John encouraged Keith to play in the orchestra, even though Keith had been learning violin for only 1 year. This in itself was a very early indication of what was to come, with John showing his boundless encouragement and belief in young people. I personally believe that John has been the most important and influential person in Australian orchestral music in my lifetime. He has trained thousands of young musicians, many of whom have moved into the professional sphere. Current principal wind players around Australia who came from QYO include the principal oboes of the Tasmanian, Sydney and Melbourne Symphony Orchestras, principal bassoon of the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and the Chamber Orchestra of Europe, principal tutor of the Victorian State Orchestra and clarinet of the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra. That list is certainly not exhaustive, and when you add strings, brass and percussion, as well as already retired players, the number would be enormous. Before oboe, I was once fortunate enough to perform a movement of a Mozart piano concerto with the then Queensland Secondary Schools Orchestra, conducted by John. This orchestra, auditioned by John, subsequently became the QYO, in part, as I understand, to a comment from Principal Flautist Murray Voisey, who at the end of the concert said to John, "Wouldn't it be great if we could do this all the time?" And so we have done for half a century. I joined several months later in 1968 and remained until the end of 1972. What a wonderful time that was, and all made possible by one extraordinary man. I actually believe that one of John's greatest abilities as a conductor, and one that we in the MSO have happily experienced with such luminaries as Charles Dutoit, Maurice Janssens, Fabio Luisi, and our retiring chief conductor, Sir Andrew Davis, was simply allowing the orchestra to play. John's natural authority ensured great command and control without any heavy-handedness, and afforded us, and myself so often, incredible freedom to express ourselves, make music, and to enjoy every moment of every rehearsal and every performance with him. Apropos that formidable presence, who can ever forget that famous occasion in the Cloudland Ballroom, where John was among several dignitaries lined up waiting to meet Her Royal Highness the Queen of England. When she eventually came to John, his easy manner, personality and bearing made it seem that she was being introduced to him rather than the other way around. Those of you who know him will understand, even if you weren't there. I will miss him forever, the golf, the music, the man. How lucky we have all been to have known him. My career without him would not have been where it is now. Thank you very much.
I'm Nancy Underhill, and after Mahler, I believe I will become more domestic in level. It's a good idea. I too would like to honor the elders past, present, emerging, but in particular, I think the night is Carmel's. I'm going to prepare you for another side of John's life in Rome. You're going to hear the Pines, of which he is very fond, but he also spent more than a few nights in a very racy, smart nightclub, which he and another person, who I'll soon identify, were looking to see Sophia Loren, Gina Lollobrigida, Visconti, etc. In other words, this is La Dolce Vita. John was one of them. They always sat at a table very close, as much as they could possibly afford, and tried to look Roman. The other one was my husband, who was very un-Roman, who was in London really spending time not going to work. John was learning the violin, messing around with architecture, and they had a lovely time. This happened apparently all too often. However, life does go on, and there was light at the end of the tunnel, and Carmel appeared with 5, ultimately, good children. All feisty. You've met 2 of them tonight. There's no question about that. They are all strong, they're independent, and they are very much Curros. And if you were ever fortunate to be in the house or fortunate to receive one of Carmel's rather thoughtful poems, you'll see the ambiance of that very large and sometimes chaotic home in New Farm. 5 family members, of course. Monica is now Port Pirie, working on that festival. She is commissioning in Melbourne very, very modern music, which is somehow or another meant to meld with the artworks in the Great Hall of the National Gallery of Victoria. I'm not sure we achieved that, but we try. Sarah, at the last email that I received, is trying to pull out all the paintings from the Parliament House. This, of course, is quite impossible. There are rules and laws about that. However, I think when we sit down and talk, we can come up with something a little bit tweakier and more even annoying. We're going to try. Now, those are 5 children, but Carmel and John had some, I assume, 7,000 children, many of whom are here tonight. Many of their parents are here tonight. You got in cars, you drove those children Saturday mornings to work on their music. You listened to the rehearsals, or practice at home, which sometimes I fear was excruciating, sometimes absolutely marvelous. All those 7,000 and more, I suspect, young musicians are aware of the discipline they received, the loving attention they received. This is a family situation, and tonight certainly proves that. And I'm honored to be able to speak, I guess, about the family. Thank you.
I first encountered John about the age of 15, being a particularly nerdy kid at Nudgee, being allowed to go to International Society of Contemporary Music concerts at the Old Con in South Brisbane. You can tell a lot about a musician by their sound, because the sound involves an immense amount of self-discipline, dedication, a certain ineffability of the spirit as well. And I can remember at the age of 15, and then memory will never leave me, of John's sound on the viola. It was a huge, rich, it was like life, it was like the ocean. There was suffering, joy and everything in it. It was something magical and something very precious. John, as a musician, has left an enormous legacy, and as Lutoslawski, the great Polish composer, once said to me when he was here in Brisbane, he said, you know, you can't put music into words, because if you could put music into words, there'd be no need for music. Many words have been spoken today and will continue to be spoken about John, but the final tribute to him comes off this stage, has come off it for many years, and will come from the stages around this country and indeed around the world for many, many years. I have particular memories that I'd love to share with you. One was in Innisfail, North Queensland, the prelude to the last act of Traviata, Jeff Crellin playing the oboe as a very, very young man. And the beauty of both Jeff's phrasing and John's conducting, I still remember from something like about 1969. I still remember the sound of the QYO in 1972 at the first international festival. I think, it might have been 1970, I can't remember. No, 70, I think it was, in Lausanne, the first time the orchestra went overseas. And there were many greater youth orchestras there that had an incredible sheen and sophistication and polish, the result of years of expert teaching of great conservatoriums, etc. and so on. But the QYO had the most beautiful sound of all of them. It had an almost sound that was a throwback to another age, a phrasing, personality, an expression that came from John and the way he was able to mould those young people into something far greater than the sum of their parts, and the way he was also able to inspire the musicians around him, the professional musicians in Queensland, to contribute and to make this ensemble possible. Many, many precious memories of John as a musician. And allied to that was his greatness as a teacher. It's interesting, Carmel said he gave his last lesson on the day he died, and also his incredible generosity of spirit. And he said to me in something like 1969, you want an orchestra here, have QYO 3. And there was a spotty-faced kid in the second violins. His name was Brett Dean, which is living proof you should never be rude to the young, because you never know how famous they might become. As a teacher, he was a legend. And the legacy is there, not only on the violin, but on every instrument in every orchestra. I mean, Sue Ellen Paulson has recently retired in Tasmania, and she had the same wonderful gift for sound and dedication that John had, and the same qualities that John inspired in so many musicians who came under his influence in their formative years. As a musician and a teacher, his legacy will live on, but it was seasoned by his Italianata, because John was a consummate Italian. He was a Renaissance prince. He'd sit around that table in New Farm after rehearsals on a Saturday, and anyone came to the table would be given a bowl of pasta and conversation about ideas, about art, about the importance of culture. He railed against modernity in so many ways, about the corporate manifestation in the way our institutions work sometimes. He was railed against that. He railed against marketing. He railed against so many of the things that have invaded the heart of music. And at the end, and I'd like to say something about Peter Luff, because it was the end when this great heart was at its most vulnerable and laid at the feet of this organisation in an exposed way, that Luffy attended to it with care and love and devotion. And we will always be grateful to you, Peter, for what you did for John in his last years. John had a fridge magnet. Don't worry, the worst is yet to come. Of course, this was Italian self-dramatisation at its best, and he was Sicilian after all, and having worked in Sicily a bit, I can tell you there's plenty of drama. But at the end, I guess, it's like looking at a great ocean liner. You look at it up close, you see screws here, you see the rust, you see a bit of salt spray, you see all these things, you see a complexity of moving parts that somehow an image of an extraordinary, complicated and rich life. And as it sails away, it assumes that magisterial magnificence that John embodies and has bequeathed to the Australian music community. As Carmel said, his sun has set, but his light lives on in all of us.
Ezra Ratlin, former chief conductor of the Queensland Symphony Orchestra, was my husband. In 1970, we came to Brisbane, where for 3 wonderful years, Ezra made music and we both made friends. Of our many friends, one stands out, John Curro, who at that time was an architect with a great love of music. Not only was he the one who helped us settle in, advising us on choosing an apartment, sending his little girl, Monica, to my Fun with Music sessions, but his deep love of music inspired him to start studying conducting with Ezra. John was the perfect pupil. He learned fast, and it soon became apparent to Ezra that John's was a talent worth fostering. When we left Australia and settled in London, many were the times when I was forbidden to enter our music room. You see, John was often on the phone from Brisbane, seeking advice about a concert he was about to conduct. The calls would last about 2 hours, and this was long before Skype and WhatsApp. It cost real money to speak to London from Australia in those days, but John didn't care. He was determined to glean as much knowledge as he could from Ezra. Ezra died in 1995, and I speak to you today on his behalf. I know he would want me to tell you what a huge talent John had. He was a fine musician, dedicated to his art. This week, by chance, I found a letter from Ezra, written to me from Brisbane, in which he told me he'd been to a concert conducted by John, describing it as pretty damn good. Then he went on to say that after the concert, John came back with him to his hotel, where Ezra gave him what he described as an, quote, in-depth appreciation of his concert work, until John left at 2:30 in the morning. That was John Curro, a stickler for detail, tireless in his effort to become a great conductor. Ezra strongly believed that it was his duty to pass on the training he had received from his own teacher, the great conductor Fritz Reiner. Reiner could trace back his conducting history to Arthur Nikisch, the father of modern conducting. The legacy of those great musicians in the past is hugely important, and Ezra was deeply happy to share it with John, who did wondrous things with it. John's achievements are legendary, and his inspiration will ensure that his work will continue for years to come. John Curro fulfilled all Ezra's wishes, and in turn passed on the inspirational techniques of Nikisch, Reiner and Rachlin to his own students. To Carmel and his family, and to all of you who loved and admired John Curro as a friend, a mentor, and as a great musician, please remember, as I do, that John's legacy lives on.
With hands that size, you'd be far better off on the viola. All words to that effect are spoken to me, an enthusiastic young violinist, over 50 years ago. No prizes for working out who spoke those words. John was well known for such utterances, and most of us sitting here can appreciate the courage and vision that was evident in the making of such pronouncements, and many over the years have benefited from his rather straightforward approach. John was a big man with big ideas, and his formation of the Queensland Youth Orchestra was probably his biggest and boldest idea. Not afraid to bang the table, to demand attention and get his point across, John was able to promote his vision, which saw the beginnings of a state-based youth orchestra movement that was to engulf the country, giving many thousands of young people the opportunity to experience great music at a high level. John embodied what was the essence of musical integrity and artistry in his dealings with all of us. We wanted to play for him, and although I was only present at the beginning of QYO, before the days of international touring, what he gave me in those couple of years began a lifelong mentorship and friendship that fueled and propelled my whole career. No one that I know could create a string sound quite like John was able to. Big and warm, much like himself. That he could still outdrive me on the golf course in his 80s was rather galling, but I guess one had to really expect that from this larger-than-life figure. We're all here to celebrate a rather remarkable human being. In the words of his daughter Monica, he certainly was an awesome creature. I'm sorry I can't be there today, but here I am in digital form, which I guess is the next best thing. We'll all miss John a great deal, but he will remain in our thoughts for as long as we draw bow across screen to blow breath through mouthpiece. Have a lovely celebration of his life, and best wishes to everyone.
I'm very sorry not to be with you in person, but my thanks to the QYO for allowing me to share some thoughts with you at this evening's memorial. Even though I was extremely fortunate to grow up in a family in which music already played an important role, the truth is that without John Curro's imaginative dream of forming a youth orchestra in Brisbane back in the mid-60s, I'm not sure whether I would ever have found my way into the professional life of music that I now enjoy, rich in experiences, learning, and lifelong friendships. Through QYO, John gave so many young Australians, thousands upon thousands of us over the ensuing decades, a sense of purpose, belonging, and a desire to achieve something special in those critical years of childhood, youth, and adolescence, years that all too easily can be defined by alienation, loneliness, and drifting. And of course, those experiences are formative whether music remains a central part of one's life or not. Over many years, as both conductor of QYS and later as my viola and chamber music teacher at the Queensland Conservatorium, John instilled in me an enjoyment in making music itself in the first place, but also a vital and healthy sense of work ethic, self-discipline and ambition, striving not only for the best performance I could achieve at a given point in my life, but beyond that, a belief that more was always possible. For me personally, one of those vital lifelong friendships of which I spoke was with John himself, and our lunches together at his home in Moray Street over the past 3 decades or more, listening to the latest QYS performance, trying out a new bow, or discussing how to conduct a particularly tricky bit in Beethoven's Eroica Symphony. All this provided a crucial ongoing link for me to this extraordinary man, born as he was to share and to teach. My love and thoughts are with Carmel and the wonderful Curro family, and may all of you gathered together today share in remembering the generous spirit, the bestower of knowledge and the providor of possibility that was John Curro.